Welcome to The Explainer. So, in the 25 years right after the Civil War, America went through one of the most transformative and, frankly, chaotic periods in its history. I mean, this was an age of incredible growth and amazing new technology, but it was also an age of deep, bitter, and often violent social division. You had a nation really fighting with itself over what it even meant to be American anymore. Okay, let's just dive right into this quote, because this one sentence just perfectly nails the central problem of the era. On the world stage, America was this rising force to be reckoned with. But back home, the country was a total mess of unresolved conflicts and competing ideas, still trying to figure out what it was actually going to be.
All right, so to really get a handle on this turbulent time, we're going to break it down into 5 key areas. We'll look at the country as an unfinished nation, then the old wounds between North and South, the new battle between capital and labor, the huge wave of newcomers from overseas, and finally, how all of this just created an age of deep, deep division.
Okay, first up, let's set the scene. The year is 1865. The guns of the Civil War have finally gone quiet, but the country is anything but peaceful. And you're looking at a nation just covered in these deep scars from wounds it gave itself. So, yeah, the fighting stopped at Appomattox, but that didn't even begin to answer the huge questions the war was fought over. How was the South going to rebuild? What was the actual place of 4 million formerly enslaved people in this country? And maybe the biggest question of all, could the North and South ever truly be one nation again?
Now, this timeline here, it really maps out the major flashpoints. And what's so interesting is how you see we start with the end of one war, but really, it's just the beginning of a bunch of new fights. When Reconstruction ends, it's a huge step back for civil rights. The Haymarket Affair shows this brutal new conflict over labor, and the tragedy at Wounded Knee, well, that marks the violent end of the American frontier.
So even as all these new conflicts were popping up, that oldest wound, the deep, bitter divide between North and South, it just refused to heal. In fact, in a lot of ways, it actually got worse.
I mean, after the war, you've got these two regions just heading in completely opposite directions. The North is having this massive industrial boom. Its political power is locked in, and it's pushing west. The South, on the other hand, is economically destroyed, politically bitter, and felt like it was basically just a semi-colony there to supply raw materials to the powerful North.
And get this, in response to ending slavery, the Southern states didn't just move on, no. They immediately passed these laws called the Black Codes. They were designed specifically to control the labor and the lives of newly freed African Americans, to basically try and put the old social hierarchy right back in place, just using the law this time. Then everything changes, and it's all because of this backroom political deal. To settle a messy presidential election, the federal government agrees to pull its troops out of the South. That one move officially ends Reconstruction, and it effectively just abandoned the whole promise of protecting civil rights, leaving the Southern states totally free to build a new system of racial segregation. Okay, so while the nation is still struggling with all those old wounds, a brand new, really powerful conflict starts tearing through the industrial North. And this was the epic battle between capital and labor. For the millions of people flooding into these new factories, the whole American dream thing, yeah, it felt a lot more like a nightmare. They were working insane hours in incredibly dangerous factories. And hey, if you got hurt on the job, tough luck, you're on your own. On top of that, most of these new unskilled workers were shut out of the existing unions, so they had nobody fighting for them. And this table, man, it just perfectly shows the two completely different Americas that were taking shape. On one side, you had these incredibly powerful industrialists, the guys they called the robber barons, who wanted zero regulation and had the government in their pocket. And on the other side, you had early unions like the Knights of Labor, just fighting for basic human dignity, an 8-hour day, safe workplaces, and a living wage. This one event in Chicago, it became a massive turning point. After a bomb went off during a labor rally, the backlash was just immediate and huge. The entire labor movement was suddenly painted as radical, violent, and un-American. And the Knights of Labor, They had 700,000 members, and they just collapsed. It set back the cause of organized labor for decades. So into this already explosive mix of regional anger and class warfare, you add one more ingredient that's going to change everything: a massive, unprecedented wave of immigration. I mean, the scale here is it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. Think about it, 12 million people. And that's just the poorest passengers, coming from Europe. They were literally the fuel for America's industrial engine. But their arrival, that was going to create some serious new friction. Right, and these weren't just numbers on a page. These were real people. They were folks from Southern and Eastern Europe trying to escape crushing poverty and violent persecution. They were immigrants coming from China and Japan across the Pacific. Most of them were young, single, and all of them just carrying this hope for a life they could never have had back home. So this massive wave of new languages, new religions, new cultures, it's no surprise it sparked a huge backlash. This gave rise to something called nativism. This idea that only the people born here, and not just born here, but white and Protestant, were the real Americans, and that all these newcomers were a fundamental threat to the nation itself. Yeah, this quote it's pretty raw, but it perfectly captures the fear and the hostility that so many immigrants faced. They weren't looked at as future citizens, people to welcome in. No, they were seen as this foreign thing that the nation just couldn't and shouldn't absorb. And this is where all these different fractures just slam into each other. The big company owners who were already fighting the unions saw a golden opportunity. They hired these desperate immigrants who would work for almost nothing to come in and break strikes. It was a deliberate strategy to pit the newest Americans against the workers who'd been there longer. It didn't just create resentment, it shattered the working class along ethnic lines. All right, so let's pull all these threads together, because when you really look at this period from 1865 to 1890, you don't just see one conflict. What you see is a nation literally cracking apart along multiple fault lines, all at the same time. And here's the key takeaway. These fractures weren't happening in a vacuum. They all fed into each other. The bitterness between North and South, the new system of racial segregation, the economic war raging in the cities, and that cultural clash between nativists and immigrants. It all blended together into a perfect storm of division. And all this leaves us with a really big question, one that honestly still echoes today. So were all these violent divisions just growing pains? The chaotic mess a country has to go through to become a superpower? Or was this era actually drawing up the blueprint for the very same social, racial, and economic fights that would explode in the next century?